Yeah, hi, I'm on central Gippsland. That plume in the that's looking west to Loy Yang power station. I'm in the plantation belt. Thousands of hectares of land was converted here in the 50s and 60s into pine plantations, and they're just in the process of logging and replanting. I think there's a bit of salvage from the fires. Now why I'm here is that those areas in the background there, see those trees that have been, looks like they've been scalded, or looks like there's a bit of die-off. What I think's happened, and I put up a video last week, is that there's been a spray drift incident happen here. I think that when these plantations were sprayed, they're sprayed aerially by helicopter, and they can use a concoction of glyphosate, another one called metsulfuron methyl, clopyralid's another one, glyphosate ammonium. I'm not sure if that's aerial sprayed or not, but in about 10 years ago there was an incident in King Lake National Park where 200 hectares of regenerating, I think it was ash, was severely knocked around by spray drift from a pine plantation up there, which was sprayed by an agricultural company. So the plantation companies generally put the spraying off to contractors. It saves them a lot of legal problems if something goes wrong. So obviously here I think the spray drift has got into the canopy of these regenerating trees from the fires here that happened about a year ago, and I'd say there's 2 kilometres of front of forest that's been impacted. That little gully in there doesn't look like it's been impacted, but over here it certainly has, and where I was last week certainly was too. So why they spray the plantations is to kill this stuff, to kill any regenerating forest, what we call natural regen. Looks like there's mainly looks like silver wattle here, which is seeded inside the plantation. So why they spray is they spray to kill off regenerating native forest, which competes with what they've planted, the pines. And so it's a massive industrial landscape. You can see some of the gully lines there that got burned in the fires last year. So all these species that have come up naturally will be sprayed, generally from helicopter, aerial spraying, and sometimes they employ hand sprays as well, but the scale and size of this operation, it makes it easier for them to spray and cheaper if they do it by helicopter. So generally they'll do a application of herbicide before the trees are planted, and then what will happen, this is a pine plantation, then what they'll do is they'll come back in about a year or two after they've planted the pine. Someone's dumped some rubbish there. It's a big problem in these plantations. Now that's seldom seen track down there, and Chesham Road, and you can see that's all been scalded as well by this spray event. So yeah, it's a couple of kilometres, hundreds and hundreds of trees. Now whether these trees die or not, or it severely impacts their growth, I'm not too sure, but it's not a good thing to happen. It's illegal, and I've got a feeling it's probably Parks Victoria land that's been impacted, and I hope we're not going to see the death of hundreds of trees. So yeah, it's nearly dusk. And this is, yeah, so anyway, what they do is they'll come back and they'll do another application of aerial spray after about 1 or 2 years after the pines are in the ground, with a herbicide called hexazinone, which will be in granular form, and it will slowly leach out into the soil, and it will kill any of the regen and weeds, but it won't kill the pines. The pines are tolerant to hexazinone. That's why they use it. They used to use it, spray it, not in pelletized form, but there was a big mistake around Creswick in the early 90s where 600 kilometres of land was accidentally sprayed by hexazinone. It drifted. And there was another issue in the 80s where a similar thing happened up near Stanley, on the Stanley Plateau, where orchards were severely impacted by hexazinone. So since that time they've been spraying these monocultures, the pine crops, with sort of pelletized, with hexazinone, but pelletized since the 90s. Prior to the 80s, they were using 2,4,5-T, component of Agent Orange, which was used in Vietnam, the defoliant, aerial sprayed, and depending on where you lived, or if you lived downstream, you'd get you could get impacted by spray drift from the 2,4,5-T, which contained, as a contaminant in the manufacturing process, the dioxin TCDD, the most toxic substance known to humanity. And this was sprayed. It was policy in Victoria to spray pine plantations with this herbicide containing the most toxic substance known to humanity. And for some reason, the environment movement has turned a complete blind eye to this issue, and seem to be happy with the state of affairs of aerial spraying in these monocultures. So yeah, there's a smokestack at Loy Yang. Thanks.